Okay, and we are recording. So, again, thank you everyone for joining us. The purpose of this meeting is to review some amendments to Chapter 59 that have been in effect since September 1st. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions. If we don't have the answer ready, we will take it under advisement and post them online. We're going to create an FAQ document for everybody. I also want to kind of point out that we are working on this process as we are implementing it. So changes are bound to happen. We're going to continue developing and refining all of these processes that we reviewed today. But if you have questions about how things work, or if you have suggestions for how we can improve, please do not hesitate to let us know. We want to make these processes as streamlined as possible for everybody. All right. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Some changes in OUSF contact people. Then review requests for OUSF funding for primary and specials, review monthly payments, review change requests, and then we'll have kind of a formal Q&A session at the end. But if you think of something in the time, raise your hand or interrupt me. We'll be happy to consider it then. So, if you have any questions later on, please send those to ousf@occ.ok.gov. And if you would please include OUSF rule change inquiry in the subject so we can quickly identify and respond to your questions. Going forward, if you have questions regarding OUSF funding for special universal services, those the manager in charge of that is Kim Walker. Requests for OUSF funding primary and primary K true-ups, the contact manager for that continues to be Hannah Smith. Chris Crowdy and Catherine Nichols are working together on monthly payments and OUSF specials and primary. I left that off. OUSF specials and primary true-ups, refunds, reimbursements. Kim Walker is the new manager of the change request program. And Kim Walker continues to be the manager responsible for OUSF administrative pre-approval requests. So a few change-ups there. Regardless, all of these folks can be reached at the ousf@occ.ok.gov email address. Next, we're going to review some updates for requests for OUSF funding for primary and specials. We're going to start with primary. The big change, there's kind of three big changes to the primary process. Most everything else is going to stay the same. One big change is the OUSF administrator may now approve amended requests for OUSF funding, but we do ask that providers do not file an amended request without prior approval from the OUSF administrator. Also, we need to note that the filing of an amended request does not extend the statutory 90-day deadline for us to issue a determination. The next item, minimum filing requirements for primary requests for OUSF funding have been updated. This simply adds some items that we were seeking through data requests to the minimum filing requirements so that we don't have to issue a separate data request for those. The next item is that notices of disbursement will no longer be filed. Instead, final determinations will include the date OUSF funding will be deemed final, provided no requests for reconsideration are filed. With that, we'll move on to the updates to requests for OUSF funding specials. We've got a couple of similar items as we saw on the last slide, namely amended requests for OUSF funding may be considered, but again, please do not file an amended request without prior approval from the administrator, and the filing of an amended request does not change the statutory 90-day deadline for us to issue a determination. Likewise, Notices of disbursement will no longer be filed for special requests. Again, final determinations will include the date OUSF funding will be deemed final, provided no requests for reconsideration are filed. New items: eligible healthcare entities as defined in the statute shall be approved for a bandwidth of up to 500 megabits per second. If the beneficiary can show good cause for an increased, a higher bandwidth than 500, that will be considered, and for good cause shown would be approved by the OUSF administrator. Finally, any affected party may file a request for reconsideration of an OUSF administrative pre-approval letter within 15 days after the funding letter was filed. Very similar to how we would handle a request for reconsideration filed in a funding request application, but you can now cover that request under a pre-approval funding request as well. Okay, next items we will review are amended rules for monthly payment requests. The big change here is intended to make the process more streamlined for OUSF as well as service providers. Generally speaking, monthly payment request submissions and attestations are no longer required to receive that funding. This is where providers would go into your provider portal and attest that the monthly payment funding amount and the circuit information was correct. That attestation and submission is no longer required, with a few exceptions that I've noted here as well. Any true-up, refund, reimbursement as a result of this change will be processed through decisions through the provider portal. It will be calculated automatically. Providers will be able to still view any line item adjustments that were made month by month. That's the big update there. There's a few specific cases where monthly payment amounts vary by month. That process will not change. For these three cases, providers need to go in and continue to request that funding every month and provide supporting documentation as applicable. And also, Oklahoma Lifeline program funding will continue to require monthly submission. Next up, for change requests. The big change here is that change requests have been formally adopted into our rules. So change request rules can now be found in Chapter 59. Change request submissions are required to meet notification requirements and to make changes, including that full list there, which I really don't need to read through. Basically, if there is a change in circuit information or the level of funding, providers are now required by rule to notify the OUSF of those changes within 30 days. The overall process of how change request submissions, how we consider them, is not changed. The big update is we have added a change request dashboard in your provider portal where you can submit change requests instead of emailing a PDF, the change request form with the attachments. Those will now be handled through decisions in the provider portal. We have updated the provider portal to dynamically request the needed attachments depending on the change request type. We'll go through some examples of how to submit change requests on the next slide. Another big update is change request resolutions, or CRRs, is the document that we are developing that will formalize whether a change request is approved or denied. The OUSF administrator will file a copy of the change request resolution in the original case in our ECF case filing system, and a copy of the CRR will be emailed to the service provider and the beneficiary. Very similar to how final determinations are emailed to the service provider and beneficiary, Now they're also going to see a copy of the change request resolution. Let's see. Check here through my notes. I will note that the change request dashboard is under construction. So we are working to continue to develop that. For now, for those change requests that you do submit through your provider portal, you will be able to see an update of what change requests have been accepted and what change requests are in progress. We're going to continue building out functionality there. And again, suggestions are welcome as to how we can improve this experience for you. With that, for the next slide, I am going to turn it over to Joseph Sickler to walk us through the change request submission that is now available in the provider portal.
So as you can see, this is on how to actually submit a change request. This would be done through the standard provider portal, as has been, the NPR process previously. So step one would be select the actions button on the provider dashboard as shown. And then step two would be select the appropriate drop down of submit a change request as shown to the right. Step three is then the beneficiary selection. So this would be who the change request pertains to. Step four is then select the type and applicable circuits. This would be pre-filtered based on the beneficiary selection. So all circuits being displayed in this form would be for that beneficiary. And then the type is the drop down of what was just shown 2 slides ago on all of the various types of change requests. When you do select a circuit, it could be one or it can be many or all, depending on what you are changing and the type. What appears after that would be dependent on the type of change request actually submitted or selected. In this example, this would be for a pause funding. There's no documentation required for this, so it's quite simple. All it would be is a description of the pause in funding. It does say the number of selected circuits and how many are eligible to be requested. In the instance that you did select one that was already paused, you wouldn't be asking for it to be further paused as it already is. But then you would just click submit. In the next example, this again would be after the type and circuit selection. This would be for a change in price or bandwidth. And obviously there would be documentation required for this. I will say on any of the types, you will just follow the prompts on the screen and upload documentation as required. But for this example, step one would be to input the new bandwidth or price details for each circuit. And so you can see on the red box, the new info is what the new circuit ID or bandwidth or monthly invoice amount would be and its effective date. Step two would be further down on that form. You can add optional comments, and then you would upload all supporting documentation. Upon submitting a change request, you should receive this pop-up that says successful submission. Again, these aren't immediate changes, so you won't see that until it's approved or denied, but you can go to the change request page on the provider dashboard, or again, feel free to reach out to OUSF for any other questions. So to see how or the status of the change requests, you can go to the change requests page again on the provider dashboard. That can be
Oh, I think there is somebody who is unmuted. Thank you.
So again, to access the change requests page, you can click the menu button where you would generally access any of the other pages. And now there is a change requests page, which will take you to item 2 shown on this screen. And it is just a chart with the status of all change requests submitted. So we can see in this example, we have several approved and 1 submitted. So that is how you can kind of see the status of all change requests as they apply.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. So that is the end of our prepared slides. We will go ahead and open it up for questions. And I see we have one question in the chat requesting the documentation area list the documents that are needed depending on the change request type. That is a great question. We are working on that. We just don't have it available quite yet. It will either be made available in the provider portal, or it might be posted on the OUSF website. Either way, we want to make it available to you so you know what to prepare in advance. In the meantime, you can take a look at the existing change request form that is on our website. The documentation expectations are the same, whether it's, from the previous process to the new process. So for example, if you were needing to upload bids or provide bids as a result of a change request, when it was emailed to us, that same requirement will apply, and the provider portal will walk you through those steps as well as what is needed. All right, and then I see Sandra Coy, you have your hand up.
So I just have a question. I'm assuming that from now on, any change requests we get, we need to go through this portal instead of emailing them, right?
Yes. Well,
okay.
With the caveat that there are some types of requests, such as change in E-rate percentage, that happen very regularly that are not at the request of the service provider, and we are working on a process to streamline that as much as possible. We haven't quite figured that out yet, but the idea is that the administrator will generate that notice and service providers will acknowledge it, and then after acknowledgement, it will be made permanent.
Okay. So it's on that one slide you said that the change request needed to be submitted within 30 days of the notice that we know that there's a change request?
Yes. And I will say, Sandra, that sometimes we know that it takes a little bit of time for you to really understand what change happened. We do want to point out we do have a change request option to pause OUSF funding, where you can simply say, we want OUSF funding to pause temporarily. We need a little bit more time to gather documentation and to submit the actual change request reflecting what happened. So that option is always available. It doesn't require any documentation other than you would request that through the provider portal.
Okay, so we've paused funding on all of ours that we know that needs change request because July 1st is when we started over, and there were several that need a change request. We still have several out there, but we're waiting on the consultants to get us the affidavits. So do we just continue to wait?
The change requests were submitted.
So we paused funding. So all the funding has been paused. So you're not paying us anything, but for the actual change request to be submitted, we have to have, the change request form, the bills, the first a month, and then the affidavit. We have everything except we're waiting on the consultants to get us the affidavits so that we can submit the actual change request to be approved or denied. The funding has been paused. We paused funding as of July, but we're just trying to wait. We're waiting on all the documentation to come so that we can actually submit the regular change request. So we just continue to wait, or do we put pressure on them that we have to have this within 30 days, or?
Our preference is to have this information as timely as possible, so I will not discourage you from pressuring the consultants and reminding them that this new rule has gone into effect.
Okay.
I will say for the funding that was previously paused, it is still paused under the new rules, under the amended rules. So until you tell us otherwise, funding will not resume for those circuits, and you would need to submit a change request through the provider portal to resume funding on those circuits.
Okay, so once we submit the change request and then it gets approved, isn't that an automatic thing that you all go out there and unpause the funding? We don't have to do anything?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, so the change request resolution will be filed. It will say, here is the funding that was approved by the OUSF administrator. Here is the effective date. After that gets filed, then it comes back to us to go through decisions and unpause and make any adjustments to the funding for that circuit to include any true ups, reimbursements, refunds that are necessary.
Okay. All right. We will start putting pressure on the consultants to get us the affidavits so that we can get these ones filed then.
And always, Sandra, we realize that some things like that are out of your control. We never want to go down the path of holding that against you. Generally speaking, we get what we need from service providers, so don't be afraid. We do want to continue working with you as we have in the past. We just have a little bit more strong of a leg to stand on should we need it in the future.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see, I see another question in the chat. Will a signed affidavit be one of the required documents for the change request? In some instances, yes. In other instances, no. Again, we will post the documentation's expectations somewhere at some point soon. It will either be in the decisions provider portal or we will post that on the website. Are there any other questions? All right. As a reminder, if you do have questions later on, please send us an email, ousf@occ.ok.gov. We will get a response to you as soon as we can. We will post this recording on our website. We will make a copy of the presentation available on our website, and we will post FAQ documents on the website. I'm not going to promise it's going to be, all of those things are going to be up by the end of this week, but hopefully by the end of next week for sure. But if you have any questions, again, always reach out to us via email.
One more question, Jenny.
Oh, we got another question. At what point should we stop waiting for a nod to be filed? What is the cutoff for those? Great question. We had some determinations filed last week that will require a notice of disbursement. We have not filed any determinations since then. So my goal is that for determinations to be filed, well, let me stop and say this. I need to work with Kim Walker on a date certain for nods to stop being filed, but you can always refer back to the determination that was filed in the record. So if your final determination does not include a date certain by which funding will be dispersed, you will expect to see a nod filed. If the final determination does list a date certain by which funding will be dispersed, you will not see a nod. Okay. Change request suggestion. Change request submission starts with service providers, but then have consultants finish the submission with affidavit. We will take that under advisement, Melissa. That's we'll see what we can do there. Okay, any other questions, suggestions? All right. Hearing none, that will be it for today. Again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And if anything comes up later, please send us an email. We will respond to you as soon as we can. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.